Alright, so we're going to do a mercenary guide here. And I guess I'm just going to walk through every merc one by one and kind of talk about when they're useful, when they're not, what they're useful against, etc. So to keep things simple, I'm going to do all the income mercenaries first. So most commonly, Snail is going to be used for kind of just fodder, utilized to make a unit go to a certain side, try to delay a unit, such as a gate guard on one, cause them to leak on one, something of that sort. They're good against units that are mostly going to be pierce damage, as they're a fortified tank. They do impact, so they're going to be decently good against fortified and arcane units. So in this case, a gate guard, which is fortified, does take more damage from a snail, though the snail does die relatively quickly, especially if it has a supporting cast around it. A lizard is primarily going to be utilized for things such as Yozora or any other type of swift and arcane tank. Lizards are great for backline. They're able to sit there and just pound away damage, especially in the early game, on units such as Cat. Cats are very liable to leak to a lizard in the first 3 waves. Usually you lizard on 2 or 3 and you can leak them relatively well. Something like Yozora is very weak against a lizard. It has 120% damage to it. So lizard against Yozora is really solid, as well as like a Berserker too. Now we get to Dragon Turtle. Dragon Turtle is primarily going to be utilized against things that are going to be weak to magic. So you're going to go for natural or fortified tanks the most. Traditionally, what I send Dragon Turtles against is wave 5 if you have like somebody with a flower, you have somebody with tanks like an antler. They're just going to be frontline tanks. They have decent health value for early game. The problem is they're still 600 health. The other possibility with the Dragon Turtle is mostly soaking up things like the shurikens of an infiltrator. It makes them so they basically don't hit the wave. It's pretty solid. But mostly anti-magic or trying to kill something with fortified health. Fortified armor type. If we go into Brute, Brute is best used against single unit damage that is not swift and not natural. So in this instance, we're looking at something like a Cat or a Eternal Wanderer are very strong to get bruited here. It's going to slow down their attack speed, makes it so that they're not going to be able to kill as much of the wave as quickly, as well as do very good damage if it's a fortified or arcane, 115%. So a Brute, while being a less income unit, you need to really look at it as it's meant to be a breaking unit. It's not meant to be something that is sent in hopes it breaks, but it's sent to guarantee a break. Now, a Brute will not always guarantee a break, but if you're doing something like into a Cat or into Eternal Wanderer, let's say Eternal Wanderer on 4, for instance, Brute on 4 against a Cat or 5 against a Cat is pretty solid. Brutes are what really stops things like Nightmare Butcher, because it slows down the healing speed. Brutes are really good against anything that has a heal buff, as it will slow down its healing and attack speed, therefore allowing you to kill it more quickly. Something like a Brute on 5 can be really good against anything with healing buff, realistically, because the Brute's usually pretty protected. To go back now to Fiends, Fiends are best utilized against swift tanks that do not have pierce damage. So they're really good against something like a Yozora. They're not so good against something like a Nikomata, because the Nikomata is going to target it and kill it quicker. But if you're sending like a Fiend and a Snail and causing like the Fiend to go right and the Snail to go left, something like a Fiend against Nikomata is usable, is acceptable. But for the most part, you're going to use Fiend for a frontline tank against things that are swift or arcane. So again, Infiltrator is a good example too. Swift unit, Infiltrator will not do as much damage to the Fiend, but it's pretty solid against a Fiend. It's pretty solid to send a Fiend to it. Now, when we get to something like Hermit, Hermit's kind of a special unit, right? Hermit's mostly utilized for when you have area of effect units like a Flower, a Banana Bunk, or a Pyro. You want to use it with things that damage a large variety of units all at the same time, because Flower only heals whatever allies are damaged. If you send a Flower on, say, a person that has only a Zeus, send a Hermit on a person that only has a Zeus, or he has a Berserker, you're not getting much value out of that. You're at most getting 7 heal per second, versus if you're sending a Hermit into somebody on, say, wave 4, and there is 12 creeps, you do 12 times 7, which, 12 times 7, that's your amount of healing then. You get a lot more value out of it if you've got a unit such as these area of effect units to heal off of. Now, something like a Millennium or a Tempest are also okay to send Hermit against, because like a Tempest, if you have multiple Tempests on the field, they kind of randomly shoot their extra spell damage around, so you can sometimes get a little bit more value out of that, though I'd still say there are better sends against something like a Tempest. And Millennium, Hermit's okay. Hermit's okay. We get into something like a Dino next. Dino is traditionally going to be utilized for things that are pierce damage. So it can be really good against, say, archers. Be really good against, say, Bunk. If you're trying to do something simple like stop a Tempest from damaging the wave as quickly. Things of this sort. You want to utilize something like a Dino to delay the damage of a unit and make it so it doesn't deal damage to the rest of the wave, right? It's a tank. It's a tank mercenary, but it's fortified. So if it's fortified, or natural. Oh, they changed that. That's right. Natural. So realistically, the only thing that it's bad against now is magic. You don't want to send it against something like an Infiltrator, but you can send it against something that's natural, or pierce or impact. But you're mostly using it as a stoppage, right? It's actually pretty good against both Yozora as well as Eternal Wanderer, because of the fact that it is natural. It does 90%, then Eternal Wanderer does 85% as a cat or a ranger or a Tempest. Something like a Dino on 4 can completely screw a cat start. Something like a Dino on 6 can completely screw a cat start. Pretty overall solid unit. Now we get back into Imps. Imps are, again, a kill shot unit, similar to Brute or Hermit. Imps, being magical and natural, are going to be mostly damage dealers to tanks. And that's their primary rationale most of the time. So let's say you go on to wave 5, and this is becoming a really common send, at least in the upper elos. It's a meme now, but wave 5 Imps. Wave 5 Imps is super solid. They're really good against tanks, especially ones that are natural. And as they deal 125% damage towards them, when they already have 46 damage per second, it's pretty quick and easy. Cannoneer comes down to impact again. So this is a ranged mercenary. You're going to want to put this in the back to try to kill front lines, such as a Bunk or something of the sort for like Arcane. Really, again, impact only fortified Arcane is it going to be good against. Mole, again, is going to be something that's utilized for area of effect. Traditionally, it's going to be only an area of effect unit or something that has very, very fast attack speed and is going to be very quick but low attack damage, so like protons or atoms. But traditionally, safety mole, hermit, etc. Then we go into Drake. Drake is the highest cost income unit. So it's going to be magic damage, primarily going to be used for, you know, fortified or natural. Those are going to be really your hit points for it. Traditionally, you want to do natural over fortified. For a long time, Drake was the best send in the game against Egg in terms of actual damage per second, because when Egg splits and has all those babies, something like Four Eyes was not very good against it. Now, Imps are technically, I think, better overall, but Drake still has a really good place in terms of damage dealing through income. It is backline though, so you don't really have to care too much about when you send it, as long as you're sending it without serpents. Pack leader is going to be super solid on early game waves or late game waves that have a ton of units. It's not so strong on, like, let's say 6 where there's only 6 Rockos, but on 7 where there's 10 Sludges, or 12 Cobras on 8, 12 Carapaces on 9. You're again sitting in a similar situation to a Hermit, with where you want to send it when there's a lot of units rather than when there's a handful of them. Similar to how, you know, you want to send Hermit when there's a lot of damage dealers. So pack leader, send on a wave with a lot of units. It's going to boost their damage and make them a lot stronger. Early game, that can be huge, especially when you know, there's only a handful of units that are defending. So if you can get a pack leader out by 7, 8, 9 area, you're looking pretty solid. It's good again on, like, you know, 12, 14, 16. What about a very fast attack speed wave with pack leader? Yeah, anything that attacks quickly is going to be fine. The biggest thing is you need to make sure that the pack leader doesn't get killed right away, or if you do send it on a wave, like let's say 8, you need to make sure that it isn't dead right away as well. 8 is still a strong wave to send pack leader because 8's a very strong wave in terms of its attack speed and DPS, but it very heavily depends on what they have built. Mimic, again, is going to be similar. It's a higher cost unit. It's kind of one of those units that's a little bit of an income unit, because if you get kills with it, it gives you 3 gold each time. So traditionally you're going to want to use something like a Mimic when somebody is spamming a bunch of units that are arcane. Let's say, you know, they've got 20 Aquas on 7, or they've got a bunch of tier 1s on 9. So they've got, you know, 12 Bone Warriors on the side. They've got a ton of Bone Warriors, ton of Rats, ton of Aquas, and then they're like, oh, to hold this wave, I'm just gonna do something, I don't know, like place a single Serpent up here. You're gonna get a ton of value out of that. You're gonna get 3 gold for each kill, and on a wave like 7 with all these baby units, you're gonna get a lot of munch power. It is a Pierce unit, so you need to really utilize it on times that Pierce is gonna be strong. So traditionally only Swift and Arcane, but if they're spamming a bunch of like really baby units, like tier 1s all over the place, you know, it's pretty solid. If they've got Cat on 7, Cats it's pretty solid against as well. It's traditionally though going to be a munch 'em up unit for things that are Swift and Arcane. Now you're starting to get into what are considered Tryhard sends, which are going to be going for kill shots all the time. So very similar to Mimic, you're going to want to use Witch whenever a person has a ton of variety of units on the board, because those Froggos are really where Witch becomes super powerful. It is a magic unit, so the biggest thing with magic units, again, is you want to make sure you're sending on a wave where they're strong, that you're not getting someone that's strong. If they have a bunch of Arcane, it might not be very good, but traditionally magic is going to be really good against the majority of tanks in the game, as the only thing that really negates magic is Arcane. So you really don't have to worry about Sand Badger. That's kind of really it. The Froggos, though, are super strong if you get a lot of them spawned. One thing to keep in mind, though, Froggos do spawn, or you get mana to spawn a Froggo whenever a unit around it dies. So, unlike wave 16, where there is, 18 units, there is potential for more Froggos to spawn. And then what you can also do is you can also send like Snails and DTs and other small units in front to try to boost Froggo up as quick as possible. Before I forget, we got a question in chat. Is sending max Snails good for some waves? I tried it against Daphne and it seemed to work. So max Snails, or a bunch of fodder units, works really well whenever they have a damage ramping unit. So whether it's Daphne, or it's Berserker on 10, or anything of that sort that it takes a while to ramp up, or even the Radiant Halo. Those are all solid ideas to like spam send on a boss wave. Doesn't mean it's always going to work, but that's kind of a usefulness for Snails. But to go back to Witch, yeah, you want to try to send as many little units as possible if you're going to send a lot of Witches, especially for like a kill shot on, say, I don't know, 16. If you've got 3 Witches, a couple Froggos is going to make a huge difference for how many things you can send out against Witches. Send out Froggo-wise. The big thing for Ogre is it's a really good damage dealer against Fortified, right? It does impact. It can shred a Fortified unit. So if you can get an Ogre out on something like 9, where a lot of people will have like a Harbinger, for instance, on the wave to tank, a Ogre is going to do a massive amount of damage, and its special attack, where it deals 125 impact damage every 3rd attack and refreshes on kill, if they've got a lot of low cost units, it'll sit there and just wham, 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 wham. It just bangs down its club and just mutilates a person's lineup. Really strong against the people that have Fortified, such as a Harbinger early game, or even if you want to be cute, you can send it against a Bunk. It's also strong against things that are arcane. So if you can get it out on, like, let's say wave 7 against a Wild Shroom that's up to a Canopy, that's really solid as well. And then at that point, anything that's arcane, it works with cats, or anything that's spammy. Alright. Now, if you want to go to like Ghost Knight is really good as kind of a tank when you have something that does a lot of auto attack damage. So, I didn't actually mean to send the Ghost Knight. But Ghost Knight's really good against auto attack damage, or something that needs impact damage as well. So something like a Bunk, while the Bunk does do extra damage to something like a Ghost Knight, the Ghost Knight does a ton of damage into the Bunk. Another option for Ghost Knight is whenever they've got Zeus's on the board, or they've got something like a Millennium. Millennium does a ton of damage to most waves, right? Just because it has a massive damage count, right? Even on its base form, 245. Excuse me. But yeah, 245. It will stop a Millennium from dealing damage to the wave for an extended period of time, and really cause a ruckus. If you can send a Ghost Knight on ranged waves, you are almost guaranteed to stop the majority of damage that something like a Zeus or a Millennium can get out. What units are best against mass arcane tanks? Anything really that does damage to arcane, such as Impact or Pierce, is good. The more damage, the better. Something like a Mimic is really good. Something like an Ogre is really good. It kind of just depends on where you are at in the game, Tech Toner, as well as where the game's like leading you. If you can save a wave and send a lot of bigger units on, say, wave 9, rather than send on 7 and 8 when they've got a ton of arcane, your best bet is to send on wave 9, rather than try to send into a bunch of arcane on 7 and 8. But if you can get something like a Mimic or even an Ogre on 7 or 8, you might be able to get some good damage. It kind of depends. But then on to 4 Eyes. 4 Eyes is your stereotypical tank buster. Figuratively or literally. The biggest thing you can do with 4 eyes is, if, let's say someone's got a bunk that's super big and they've got a antler on it. This thing's going to have a ton of health. It's going to have a ton of value in terms of its healing. It's damage reduction now. A 4 eyes ramps up slowly. And basically just does extra damage after consecutive hits. So it's really good against big tanks. It's not so good against lower units. For the most part, though, used as a tank buster. Get rid of big units such as White Mane, Havens, anything that has a lot of health. Otherwise, like Yazoras, for instance, are good against them. Are good to send it to the new Holy Avenger unit. Is really 4 eyesable, and if you can try to send anything to Holy Avenger, 4 eyes is probably one of the best ones. Otherwise, then on to Centaur. Centaur is going to be one of your like largest cost Pierce units. Before I forget though, ranged, sits in wave, tank, sits in wave, ranged. Centaur comes into the wave in the wave itself, so it's not going to tank for you. If it does get targeted though, it does have good health, so it isn't super problematic. But one thing that Centaur is good against is a lot of like Swift and Arcane spam, as it is in Pierce. So on waves like 16, 14, even 18, a couple Centaurs can definitely wreak a ton of havoc and deal good unit damage. The positive to Centaurs, though, is they like cleave and swipe through multiple units at the same time. So if they've got a lot of Yazoras, for instance, or something of the sort, Centaur is super nice. It's just getting it out can be a little bit of a problem, as it is a 280 send. So you really are only going to be utilizing it late game. Siege Ram is very similar in the sense that Ghost Knight is a tank because of its ability, you know, the 30% taken off of auto attacks. Siege Ram does 15% less to ranged. All range attacks do 15% less, meaning things like elite archers on waves like 16, 17, anything that elite archer strong pierce-wise, you're going to have a good time with Siege Ram. Siege Ram's also going to negate a little bit Radiant Halo, though Radiant Halo will kill it quicker. But it's really solid against Daphnes, things of the sort. You're going to send this mostly on ranged waves or waves where you want to protect the wave, right? It's all about protecting the wave then in that sense. Shaman is going to be best used on boss waves or waves that have small amounts of units that deal a ton of damage. So waves 18... because wave 18, waves 15, it used to be wave 13, but I don't think that's really in vogue anymore. Wave 19 is good because it just does a ton of damage because they're a fast attack wave. Wave 10, if you can get a Shaman out, it's not bad, though I think there's other units that are better for wave 10. But yeah, for the most part, it's going to be utilized on waves that have low unit count. Because of its buff, it just makes an ally attack faster, and it does a lot more damage then because of it. 40 extra damage for 5 seconds is a huge amount of damage, especially when it's attacking at 10% faster. So on a wave that's already doing, you know, a ton of damage, it can do exponentially more just because of that. Kraken ends out being the end-all be-all send. Basically it's stronger as the game goes on. So if you send a Kraken on like wave 11, it's strong, but it proceeds to scale every single wave. So if you send Krakens on, let's say 21, you're going to get a lot more value out of them than you would even on 15. But they're arcane and they're impact, so they're going to be mostly utilized to stop magic damage. If you can stop the magic damage before it hits the wave, you know, that's always a positive. For the most part, though, magic damage stoppers such as... let's see here. Zeus.
Welcome to
trying to think what else. Soul Gates to an extent. Infiltrators. Priests of the Abyss, things like that are all going to get stopped pretty hard on like wave 15 or 20 against a Kraken. But yeah, Krakens tend to be like the big boy send. It isn't always the right play, but stunning a Kraken sometimes can send a message, you know? Like, you think you can win, huh? Enjoy a Kraken. And they're fun. We'll see if they add any more later, but right now I think the line was pretty solid. For the most part, though, you want to try to do income units early game and send maybe bigger units late. If you think you can leak someone, or you know you can leak someone early, that's when you go for like a kill shot with a Brute, Imps, you know, Mole Hermit, or something like a Pack Leader, or even a Mimic. But for the most part, early game, you're going to be sending those income units. Late game, mid to late game is when you're going to start sending more Tryhard units to try to leak. Kind of depends on your playstyle, though. Some people want to save 1 to 7 to get Ghost Knight on 8. Some people want to save nothing and only go for a Ghost Knight when it's available within a one wave carryover. When to Cannoneer over Imp? I mean, for the most part, Cannoneer's impact, right? So Cannoneer's only good against Fortified Arcane. You're going to want to do Imps the majority of the other time if you're going to go for a kill. Magic damage is good against Swift, Natural, or Fortified, just bad against Arcane. The only time you really want to Cannoneer over Imps is if you know for a fact they've got a unit you might not be able to kill. But yeah, I think that's kind of it, guys. I walked through this all pretty fast, I think, but this is still a 26-minute video. So if you guys have more questions on individual mercs and like usefulness, I might try to utilize those in something like a unit guide situation, is because for the most part I don't have time to walk through every single wave on when a Grarl is bad. But if I do a Grarl start video, something like walking through every individual wave might make more sense, and then I can kind of talk a little bit more about that. But for the most part, I think I touched on everything pretty quickly but pretty thoroughly for the speed we went. If you guys have individual questions on certain units and how they match up against certain things, drop them in like the comments and I can do a different video on all that. But outside of that, I think this video is good, so thank you all for tuning in.